midst of Deer versus Dark, best of 7. And if you're tuning in late, you might be a bit surprised by the scoreboard. It's 2-0 in favor of Deer.
That Deer has just executed 2 very crisp double Stargate openers, not the triple. And the thing is, the difference between what Deer is doing as to what other Process did during regular season with this type of build is he only did 2 Stargates, and there was always a follow-up push, not a, okay, I'm just going to make 35 Oracles and kill you. It's just straight transitioning, using the Oracles to control the map, catch Hydras.
To expand
very well done.
early.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the biggest thing. His economy just balloons out of control if the Zerg has basically 0 pressure. And that's what he's getting out of these early leads, these early plays with the Oracles.
Now we're going to a map that Dark picked, but it's also the 3rd map for Deer, so this is another map that he prioritized very highly. It's only going to be when we get to the next map, Whirlwind, where we really start going into Dark territory. At least have the knowledge that even if he loses this one, we'll go that far, but Deer is on a roll right now.
Yeah, so guys are going to be jumping into Ascension Ire for game number 3. Let's see if Deer can keep it up. Here we go, jumping into game number 3, down in the bottom right. Currently 2 games ahead, it is Deer.
It's very focused. His opponent to the top left is Dark, of course, in purple. You know, one of the staples of Deer, as he goes for a very early probe scout, was always that when expectations were high, he equally disappointed. Disappointed in 3 round of 4s in the GSL. This will be the first time he makes it this far in an SSL. And it almost feels like, if you're a Deer fan, the fact that he's up 2-0 makes you a little bit more stressed out, a little bit more nervous.
Yeah. It's like, don't get excited about Deer, don't get excited about Deer.
Exactly. And he looks so collected and calm in the booth. Dark has always been this way. He's won so many reverse sweeps in his career and has been playing StarCraft 2 much longer than Deer. Remember, Deer's an ex-STX player who played Brood War before switching to StarCraft 2, whereas Dark really got his start on Slayers. Dark has been playing the game professionally since 2011, so this is his 6th year of StarCraft 2. He's seen these stages so many times. Never in a GSL, but in SSL, and of course abroad, BlizzCon. So he's not going to get nervous going down 0-2 in a best of 7. But Deer is the type of player who normally gets emotionally affected. So it's important that he takes this 2-0. You can see it on his face that he is just, he's not overhyped or, you know, overconfident, but he's very much like, okay, according to plan, this is exactly what I prepared. And that's important for a player like Deer that is so emotionally invested and will easily lose his temper if things go the other way.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see, once again, here in game number 3, if Deer is just going to do the same build again. And if so, how is Dark going to respond to that? Ascension to Ire is going to be one of these longer maps. Definitely have a big rush distance from your natural to perhaps the 3rd base of the Zerg, if that's where you want to go hit. So Deer, maybe he mixes it up this time on this map, so it goes for something else. And how is Dark going to respond? Is he going to overreact? Is he going to make, you know, 2 spores at every base after he only sees 1 Stargate? Because you don't want to overcompensate if the build isn't even coming. It's one of the struggles for Zergs dealing with a build like this.
And with the execution we've seen from Deer so far, it's been tough to kind of figure out where the spores should be. Like, if you were going to commit spores, he's just simply going to go to the other base, right? He went to the main base in game number 2, was at the natural and the 3rd base in game number 1. It's very difficult to say, well, you should just have more spores, you should commit spores, but then he has to commit 3 more spores, and he's built 6 spore crawlers, which means 6 drones he paid money to lose. So it's difficult to actually make a decision like that when small things matter so much in a game like this, and an RTS played at the highest level. So I think the response is going to have to be to better track those units. Maybe follow them a little bit better with Queens, spread the creep a little bit earlier between the bases. At least those would give him opportunities to have a better reaction time. He sees the first Stargate. It is the second gateway, in fact, that we see first before the second one is added. We'll have to wait until the Void Ray gets started to see if this build is going to be the same build that we saw in the first 2 games.
No doubt that that Void Ray is going to come out. He's already making 3 spores on time to match that first Oracle coming out. Let's see that Void Ray. There it is. It's a very smart decision out of Deer. Even if he's not going to go into the same build, you want to keep Dark guessing. You want to keep him on his toes and perhaps overcommitting.
Very fast third this time, though. We'll add it right away. That's the first big tell. Dark scouts it. He's been on top of his scouting all 3 games. On Dukirk, he scouted that it wasn't a third base early. That helped him react to the second Stargate. But now he knows it's very unlikely there's a second Stargate, at least not at this timing. Okay, he's going to stasis here just to catch the larva. The cool thing about stasising larva instead of trying to stasis the mineral line is there's absolutely no counterplay. You can't run your larva away. You only have 1 queen here, so you can't protect those units.
It's also a bunch of overlords. It looks like he had a couple making at other bases, but would have been interesting if he actually caught the overlords and it kept Dark supply blocked. You would have to have some pretty insane timing to actually pull that off consistently. Perhaps a bit of luck more than timing.
Sure. Still very frustrating to play against. And, you know, perhaps if Dark makes like 1 mistake, then he does get supply blocked no matter what.
And it makes sense when you make the Void Ray too, because you're killing his overlord. So perhaps that's actually just something that Deer mixes in on purpose all the time.
So he's just going to try to harass over here, force a drone pull. I think he might have wanted to stasis again, but is unsuccessful. But yeah, as you say, it's just a smart, intelligent follow-up. He will add this time the triple Stargate. Oh, this is so meta. He is really in Dark's head. This is a little bit later than you would normally add triple Stargate to go for the Oracle timing.
Yeah.
And he's cleared all the Overlords.
Dark's just really not going to have much of an idea. He sees the 2 gases at the third are taken very fast. Maybe that will give him a hint. But outside of that, he's only seen Deer playing 1 Stargate. And there is 3 Oracles here. There are 3 of these Oracles, so that's another tell for him to say, okay, you're committing to the air.
Scouts, though, drop Overlord, too. But yeah, as you say, I mean, he knows he's you know, committed to the air, at least in terms of army composition so far. Shutting down the drop so frustrating for Dark. At least he was able to save the Lings. You know, Void Ray gives you so much protection against Dark's drop style. You remember he did pioneer this style back in the 2016 finals. And this is going to be the triple Stargate Oracle. Very different than the first 2 games, though.
Yeah, you can see the way that Dark did prepare for this. He has made 7 queens. The 8th one is about to pop out. He's making 2 extra spore crawlers already, as well as that Hydralisk Den to eventually deal with the large number. So it seems like he has caught on, at least, which is a good start for Dark. And as you and I were talking about in the break, he just wants to get into the late game. He's supposed to be the better macro player. It's just Deer hasn't let him get there yet. So this could definitely be a game that looks a lot different compared to those first 2.
Yeah, I mean, Deer's approach to all 4 games now this season he's played against Dark has been to cripple him early, cut his leg off, and then just play the better game in the late game, where Dark's basically constantly playing with 1 hand tied behind his back because of the tempo advantage that Deer gained. And in this game, I feel like Dark's in his best position he's been yet. He hasn't really sustained massive amounts of damage. In fact, he's going to trade with these Zealots. I'm not entirely sure if this is really going to be worth it. And this base is already under attack, but look, his queen management much better. Didn't have a spore, but had all his queens in position. Made those extra spores you were talking about. He's just going to fight this straight up, though, targeting the queens with the most energy, but that is too many.
That's the first big mistake we've seen Deer make in this series. Just running straight into 10 queens with lots of energy saved up from earlier. Also lost a bunch of his Zealots to those Lings that are easily replaceable, as Dark is switching into Hydras. Is going to go Speedbanes as well with very early melee upgrades, already almost done with his +2. So Dark, really like his position here.
Yeah, I mean, he's just staved this off, and unfortunately for Deer, he's continued to make these Oracles because he doesn't really have much of another transition point in terms of DPS yet. He is going to take a 4th Nexus. It's now complete, but he doesn't have the massive advantage to hold on to it that he did before. The advantage he does have, though, in terms of where his 4th base is again, this is a large map. The first 3 maps really have been larger maps. So taking that 4th is pretty reasonable, but run by alert.
Run by alert coming in here, 8 probes. essentially for free. Didn't lose any of these Lings. We got to look at the Oracles in the main, though. There are 3 Spores as well as multiple Queens. So Deer going to be a bit more cautious this time around.
Baneling's getting set up here for another run by 2. He needs to be map aware for these things. One of the weaknesses I looked at when I looked at both of these players actually in their previous series was they're both actually really weak to each other's harass. Dark was late to respond to the Zealot run bys. Deer almost always lost every single probe without paying attention. Speaking of which.
Oh boy, the speed finishing up just in time. 12 probe kills. Yeah. Just hunting down the probes, and as you said, Deer just had no idea it was coming in, was not prepared.
Does he have enough units here to defend the counterattack? He will have stasis wards being planted right now to try to buy time. All it's going to take is an Overseer. Hydras have such good range, they can just blow these up. Does see this coming. Okay, does trigger the first
look
2.
At the Banelings. 30 Banelings on the way.
Force fields need to be good.
Stasis wards, but he doesn't have any more. There's only 1 towards the top side, and look at that concave for the Zerg, pushing on in.
Force fields are really good against these Banelings. He's just trying to buy time against these Hydras to get more units out. Just a few Stalkers at the back actually not firing, but still Oracles fare very well against Hydralis here. The Stalkers do survive here.
Yeah, they're surviving. It looks like eventually in the end, Deer will lose all of his Oracles, but more importantly, he holds the attack off. That was looking very dire for Deer. Surprisingly, he hangs on, and he has restarted that Oracle production. So I guess this game is not over. I was expecting that one to end it there.
The Stasis Wards bought a lot of time. The Lings to the top couldn't get the full surround on the Stalkers, which survived throughout that fight, even though not all of them were firing. And he did, micro his force fields really well against the Banelings, so that kept him alive there. But still, this was such a massively favorable trade for Dark. I feel like the only weakness or the only weak point for Dark in this game could be if he continues to be hyper-aggressive with Hydras and Lings without massing up a large force, bleeding units into Deer, who still does have an incredible economy. Remember, this is not a 3-base Protoss as it normally is in this matchup, in this situation. It's a 4-base Protoss with good upgrades, double forges, blink stalkers, charges nearly complete. So Dark does need to take this game a little bit more seriously than he would against, say, a Protoss who's got 3 bases on Newkirk right now after he had to trade like that.
I mean, you're mentioning the upgrades. It's not even just attack and defense. It's also Storm on the way, but not even just that. He has a Robo coming in. He has Immortals on the way. He still has that triple Stargate production, whereas Dark, this is it. This is the only tech we're seeing. It's going to be Ling, Bane, Hydra all the way through. He's maxing out again. Nice pull here. Still might be able to get some probes. Looks like still 6 in the end. But yeah, Dark, I mean, he's walking Queens across the map. He wants to end the game right now before Storm is out.
Such a close timing window. I worry for Dark here. Storm's done. Storm's done. He's getting High Templar out.
No, Storm isn't done. It got canceled, actually.
Okay.
That's kind of interesting.
I'm not entirely sure how that happened. By the way, he does not have Storm, as you say. We'll have 2-2, and only 1 Archon here. He's not in position. This is too many Queens for the Oracles to fight head-on. He needed that Psystorm. Not entirely sure why it was canceled. That counterattack isn't going to be enough to, stop the damage that's already done here. He is going to buy time with force fields, but so many probes will die.
Yeah, this entire base is going to be taken out. And keep in mind, I mean, it's Legacy of the Void, right? He doesn't have too much mining outside of that one base, whereas Dark has multiple bases. Yeah, these Zealots are getting to work on the main and the natural, but those aren't the bases that are mining, really. And eventually, Dark will come back and deal with these Zealots and be happy that he was able to take out that 4th base of Deer.
One of the cool things Deer did in that series against Dark, too, I keep referencing that one, but it's such a parallel we can draw, is that he did have good control of Archons. His Archon walls against the Banelings were incredibly strong, really good defense of his squishy units, his High Templar. But in this game, he doesn't have the High Templar. He's spending all of his gas on Archons. Storm is just not in this game, I suppose, either.
The Korean commentators are as confused, because I think they realized a little bit later, but I think it was just an emergency
Cancel
decision.
to make more units?
Cancel, he's like, I need to get Archons out, but, I mean, it's expensive, but it's not that expensive.
Well, I mean, especially when you look at how much gas he had banked to build all these Archons, so you really need that gas at that one moment.
And they weren't even on time, right? He only had 1 Archon in the fight, and the rest of them were behind the force fields as his 4th base went down. Keep in mind, the Protoss army, as I said before, is still very strong, has a lot of Archons in here.
Sure.
Dark is still on the same tech.
just feels like that Psy Storm would be so useful here.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I think about all the things he could have, the two things you think about that he doesn't have are the Storms and possibly Colossi. Getting the Colossi at this stage is so difficult. Chrono's still on that Temple Archives. I suppose we'll have an answer to this at one way or the other at the end of the series as to what happened with the mystery disappearing Storm, but fourth base is retaken. Dark, losing all those drones, had to go back home and re-drone. That's why Deer was able to retake this fourth base, hold on to it for so long. Now he's going for the follow-up attack. He has remaxed here, 199 of 200 supply.
But again, this is the same attack. This is the third version, right? It's like Dark Strikes Episode 3 or something, and now it's an entirely much more strong opponent that he's going up against. That's like 10 Archons in the mix with the Mortals as well.
Better upgrades.
This time the Queens aren't even with the army.
Yeah, better upgrades too for Deer. The other Archons warping in. Okay, this is going to be the make or break fight here. There are sentries. Guardian Shield goes up. No force fields required here. The Archons, again, tanking most of the Baneling shots. Now he's going to fight the Hydras head on. Isn't enough Protoss here, though. The overcharge not in range. It looks like Dark has finally done it.
Looks like Episode 3 was the best episode for Dark as he comes in and smashes that army.
Zealot harassment, though, is coming across the map. Will Dark have the answer this time? I think he does. He has Lings, Queens at home. And it looks like Deer is just out of steam in this one.
Yeah,
there it is, GG.
And GG Dark is going to take a game as it does move to 2-1 in favor of Deer. But Dark clawing his way back, knew what he had to do. And I mean, yeah, again, the big question once again is why the cancel on Storm?
Yeah, that's the big mystery because I feel like with Storm, the trades are always better there, especially when Deer was contesting at that high ground ramp, the little plateau in the middle of the map, where Dark always had to funnel out. If he had Psy Storms there behind those Archons, he spent so many resources to build. It would have been such a great fight for him every time. Dark's weakness in this matchup, everyone always goes back to, he always just stays on that Hydra Baneling tech. Very much weak at dealing with Broodlord type techs most of the time, especially in a game where he's even like that after losing so many drones. And if Psy Storm were there, that comp is so much weaker. So for Deer, we'll never know, not until this series is over, why he canceled or what happened with that Psy Storm.
Yeah.